All right, 6 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the Credit River City Council meeting for January 21st, 2025. Eric, I think it sounds like I hear your speaker over there. I think that maybe it's better. No, you're not on Zoom? Well, maybe you're not you then. Okay. Just heard that echo going in the room here a little bit, but
Your ears.
all right. So before we begin, I do want to introduce to everybody Lucas Chase, who is our new finance director, started just under a week ago and is digging right in and getting things organized and getting things under control. So Lucas comes to us from an audit background. He did municipal audits, and so he's very familiar with the guidelines and the best practices that cities operate under. And we're very excited to have him on board and start to help us with that finance part of our city here. So thank you, Lucas, for coming on board and welcome. And he'd be more than happy to chat with you if you have any questions. So
Welcome. With
that, we'll move into approving or amending the agenda. I do have two changes in the general business. I'd like to remove 7.1 and 7.2. And it looks like there's no sheriff's deputy, so we'll remove the sheriff's report as well.
Okay.
Other than that, is there any other changes to the agenda? I would take a motion to approve then.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Thank you, Leroy. Thank you, Jay. Motion is second to approve the agenda with the three noted changes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Consent agenda. Those items on the council agenda which are considered routine or non-controversial are included as part of the consent agenda. Unless a council member specifically requests that an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, a second, and a vote. Any item removed from the consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. Tonight on consent agenda, we've got 3.1, approve the minutes from the January 6, 2025 City Council meeting. 3.2, approve payment of claims and transfer requests as presented. 3.3, approved resolution 2025-05, approving a minor subdivision at 21506 Texas Avenue. Is there anything on the consent agenda that any council member would like to remove and consider separately? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Abe. Second by Jay. Motion is second to approve consent agenda as written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Open forum. The public forum is intended to afford the public an opportunity to address concerns to the council. The public forum will be no longer than 30 minutes in length, and each presenter will have no more than 5 minutes to speak. Topics of discussion are restricted to local governmental topics rather than private or political agendas. The council may discuss but will not take formal action on public forum presentations. Was there anybody nobody signed up for public forum tonight? Does anybody like to speak in open forum? Seeing none, we will close open forum and we'll move on to 6.1, hold public hearing for the 2025 city fee schedule, ordinance 2025-01. And which one of you have got that one? Amy? That one yours?
Everything is remaining the same except for the park dedication fees, but all the rest of it is going to be exactly like the first one.
Okay, thank you. Do me a favor and just hold that square button down there, Lucas, to turn that microphone on. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Council members, any questions or comments before we open the public forum? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for the 2025 city fee schedule. This is the opportunity for the public to make comment on the proposed 2025 city fee schedule. If you'd like to speak, I do ask that you do come to the podium, state your name and address, and then you may comment. Don't everybody run up there at once. Again, this is your opportunity to comment on the 2025 city fee schedule ordinance 2025-01. So seeing that we have no comments, I would take a motion from the council to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Bill.
Second.
Thank you, Abe. So motion by Councilmember Markert, second by Councilmember Zanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. That will thereby conclude the public hearing, which it happens to be our next item then in 7.3, which will be consider ordinance 2025-01, setting certain fees for the 2025 and the resolution 2025-03 summary for publication. So we heard the summary from Clerk Jones already that the fees are remaining the same for 2025 except for the park fees. Is there any further comment or discussion from the city council before we take motion on this?
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to recommend to the council that I put together I downloaded our fee schedule into an Excel spreadsheet, and I've also pulled another city's fees, and I'd like our finance director in this coming year, 2025, to take a look at our fees to make sure that they've kept up with inflation and that we're not, if you can, I don't even know if you can do this, but make sure that we're covering our costs with the fees. I did compare ourselves to Prior Lake. I only looked at one city, and we're high in some areas, but we're also low in quite a few areas, and really low, like for example, in our liquor licenses. So that would be my recommendation. Rather than me doing it and explaining it tonight, I'd like to just give whatever I did over to Lucas.
Yeah,
That's all right.
I think that's an appropriate thing, Bill. And to that point, the liquor license one, Lucas, might be the most recent one where you have some data points on, because we just did approve both of them for renewal here. So maybe talking with Clerk Jones and Planner Matt, that to talk about the time that they have invested in those and make sure that we've covered their time. Again, our fees are intended to not be a profit center, but be cover our efforts. Any other comments or questions by the council? Hearing none, whenever somebody's ready, I would take a motion to approve ordinance 2025-01, setting certain fees for 2025, as well as a motion to approve resolution 2025-03, authorizing the summary publication.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Leroy.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. Got a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2025-01, setting certain fees for the 2025, as well as resolution 2025-03, authorizing the summary for publication of that ordinance. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. 7.4, consider ordinance administrative fines. The ordinance will be 2025-02 and the fines schedule of 2025-03 and the resolution 2025-04, which would be the summary publication of that one. I'm looking to see, Eric, did you have that one? Your name is on that
But
one.
I know the city attorney is online for us.
Could you turn your microphone on, please?
Yeah, okay, I'll do my best. I know our city attorney is online as well. But I know the mayor and council, you've seen these in the past and they have not changed in any meaningful way. Both the planning commission did hold a public hearing on both elements. The underlying ordinance itself and process, as well as the subsequent fee schedule or penalty schedule, I guess is the best term, just last week. In both instances, the planning commission recommended approval, and they're here for you tonight to finally consider, and the city clerk did prepare a summary resolution for the ordinance itself, whereas the fine schedule is relatively short. Should need a summary for that. So with that, I'd certainly defer to city attorney or clerk.
Perfect. City Attorney McKell, do you have any further comment on this action tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to add. Eric fairly summarized the history here. You have been through this ordinance before.
Okay. Thank you. Council, any discussion, questions on this one?
I have a question for Peter. So there have been a handful of complaints that we've had in the past that have been written to that have been sent to Eric or a number of the council members. Do we have to start the process over again and send a letter out saying that you're now going to be fined if it's not addressed? Could you answer that?
I certainly can. There's a constitutional principle here where we can't pass a new penalty and apply it retroactively. And so if the choice is in terms of code enforcement to start using the administrative citation, that will be a going forward choice. It can't be retroactive.
Do we need our citizens to resend a complaint, or can we do that on our own?
All we need is evidence of a present violation, however that comes to us.
Okay. So I guess I have a question for the council then. Is that what we want to do? Because I know there's a couple that have been outstanding for a year or more. And I would recommend that we have Eric send an email saying that this is in place now. Would you like, if it's still happening, would you like us to do anything? Or just so we can say that we're addressing it as opposed to not doing anything.
Right, I think, I think, Bill, maybe the appropriate thing is that, staff investigates or has the current files and then does drive-bys to see if they can still verify that there's still a ongoing situation, and if it is, we can send a new letter.
Okay.
Does that seem appropriate?
Oh, sure. Mayor Council, the city does have we'll go back to our three-step, notice. Basically, hey, folks, there's a violation. Please get it addressed. The second time we'll increase the intensity of the language a little bit, and that would include the language of the threat of this, I guess, is the term. And then finally, we would issue the citation.
Do you know how many we have like outstanding since you've been here?
Handful, 3.
We do have a ticker file though that has all those tracked. Okay.
Some come and go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have two questions. Section 4A3, it's talking about the compliance letter. It says a compliance deadline, providing a reasonable time for compliance based on the nature of the violation. It seems pretty vague. Especially as now you can send the compliance letter and then immediately say it's 1 day and then turn around and put a fine on there. I think it would be prudent to put at least no less than whatever the number may be, from date of receipt of the compliance letter before we could, have the fine. The other thing that I question is the exceptions, which is the same section under D. Makes all the sense in the world for me for a repeat offender. But license violations, traffic and parking violations, noise violations, and I even say half of animal violations. There's no reason we have to go straight to a fine for these. If my neighbor's making too much noise, do we have to put a fine on them immediately? Can't we go with a letter before that? Safety is maybe where we have to start going straight to a fine. I think this seems a little bit overreach personally.
If I may, Mayor Council,
Yeah, Administrator Johnson.
Just the nuance to it under item D. The terminology says may proceed, not that it shall proceed. So I think it also might probably depend on the nature of the violation, what's really going on. Is there a risk to health, safety, welfare, something substantial? We would probably always fall back to our established ask. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where we wouldn't. Unless it were somebody's life and limb is at risk, We had well, for example, the concert last summer, how do we deal with something like that? Do they instantly get a citation? Well, I don't know if we would actually do it that way, but if they did it again this year, maybe they would. So,
Right, but that's a repeat offense.
right, it's a repeat
It
offense.
is.
So it doesn't say that you shall, but it does say may.
Yeah.
And at that point, you've got to use some discretion in terms of who's implementing the citation.
And I think that's kind of always been our stance, is that we don't want to be this community of being the heavy You know, and that every time you turn around, you're getting a letter from the city, you're getting fines from the city, that it's, you know, we don't go out looking for problems. You know, we've always been, complaint based. And I think that may, in that solution, you know, combined with the culture of us being complaint based more than anything.
And all the time I've been on this board that we'll bang on the door and talk to them and have a chat with them, and 99% will say, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. And
Mhm.
you get that 1%, this is, get off my property. So, you know,
And I agree wholeheartedly, and I
Mhm.
believe that's a true statement. However, leaving that in there like that allows for us to, in my opinion, be heavy-handed quickly. So I would recommend us put some verbiage in there, may proceed directly in the case of human harm or something of that nature. Cause I'm sorry, noise violation, you're gonna have to put a fine on me right away. That seems way over.
Depends how loud the noise is. There's, if you're putting a big fireworks show on, man, no. Peter, do you have any thoughts and comments on proposed change in language in that section at all?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you, council member. Looking at the screen here, I believe that's Council Member Zanto making the comments.
Yes.
First of all, with respect to the you can go straight to a citation without a warning letter for reasons other than a repeat offense. This is a very typical list that is similar to the sort of things police every day could issue a ticket or figure what you need as a talking to, and that discretion is out there because it's really hard to codify every possible circumstance you will encounter in real life. And so the discretion is there. The test of reasonableness applies. If there is a concern of overreach, you absolutely can amend the ordinance to retract that list of terms. I think it's likely for the example of noise violations, in most cases, this is a talking to. I actually remember an occasion when some neighborhood kids in our neighborhood were having a really loud party and the police came. No one got a ticket or anything, but they sure quieted it down as soon as they showed up. That's sort of just neighborhood lifestyle policing is fine. That's different than someone deliberately, obnoxiously blaring music directed at their neighbor or something in order to advance a feud. You know, there are different circumstances you might encounter, and so codes like this are written to give some what I'd call prosecutorial discretion to try and cover all of your bases, and it does require, no question about it, some confidence in the code enforcement people. And if you have a lack of confidence in their judgment, I would not give them discretion. If you are confident, then this gives them all the tools in the toolkit to reasonably address problems that are of concern to the neighbors in their community.
Thank you. Any further comment? And Abe, let's go back to your first question. What was that? It was 4A?
3. And
3?
again, same thing. Yes, I fully agree that we're gonna, 99 times out of 100 handle it correctly, but this allows it for me to get a letter and state, we're gonna find you tomorrow, and I can't possibly fix the issue before that. So,
So you're saying of the wording reasonable time
yeah,
is where the words that you have a problem with.
Which section is that?
That would be, so just above the exceptions, so the exceptions were at 4D, this
Oh,
would
yeah.
be in
So
4A number 3. 4A
Oh.
number 3,
Got it.
yeah, where it says a compliance deadline providing a reasonable time for complaint based on the nature of the violation.
I mean, I get to a point, so I get a fine. I get $100 fine. Here's my option to pay it. Or to go and sit before the whatever.
The council.
The council, and if the council decides that too bad, now I'm paying $1,100 because I didn't even have an opportunity to fix it before the fine came. Because now we have to cover the $1,000 fine, the fee for having a, I don't call it what we call it down here.
I get what you're saying.
If I'm gonna contest it, and if my contest fails, I'm now covering the $1,000,
I don't think, and certainly,
not to exceed 1,000, it
I
says.
think the city attorney can say, I don't think that was the intent of that to be an additional penalty for facilitating your due process. Hey, here's your $100. I think if you continue the violation in the interim, that maybe is a different story. And I don't know what.
Yeah, and then, I mean, we have the second violation, third violation, fourth violation, so, and that, well, that makes sense to me, I don't like when we as a government impose these soft language that we now have someone that has, you know, we'd love to say we're all reasonable, but, you know, it may get personal for someone, and now with that list of people, we can.
One other constraint, Mayor, if I could, that.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
That's, if staff is out there writing these, you know, whoever that is. And they're writing things that are clear and apparent, well, that's great, that makes a lot of sense, I think we all know what those would be. And people that have the right to appeal, but if those seem to beginning to be a little gray, that recourse is back to you folks as a council to give better direction or clear direction to that staff member to say, hey, wait a minute, this is a little fuzzy here. Because their their capacity only comes from this ordinance and you folks, so they're gonna be pulled from a political perspective, but from a different perspective to work through the issue and try to get things resolved. They don't, if it was attached to some kind of incentive or, you know, then you have some questions, but I would argue your staff is not looking for problems, and if they kept coming up with the same citation and you folks had an issue with it, I would suspect you guys would say so. And they're gonna be pulled to not go overboard with this very quickly, because I'm pretty sure you guys would let them know. No doubt, they're beholden to you folks as the policy setters. So there's always.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead,
Eric.
Oh,
Attorney
I'm done.
McPhail.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Zanto's concerns, and I understand there's a desire for some sort of regimented, there's going to be some minimum period of time, reasonable, but setting a floor. That's really appealing. The challenge with it is we have a one size fits all ordinance, and this applies to any violation of the code, nuisance, zoning, whatever. And so it's hard to say what a reasonable time is to address something while the neighbors are all living with it when we don't know what the it is. You know, if you got to deal with a junkyard or something like that, that may take a week or two to clean up. If you're blaring your radio at the neighbors, you know, maybe that's not a thing that reasonable notice is more than a handful of days or even a day. But it's setting what's the minimum is also telling the neighborhood how long they may have to put up with it before we go to citation. And so without knowing what the it is, we can add a minimum, but that also will make our instrument a little bit blunter for how we react to the violations.
You almost have to then immediately upon notifying them right away, you almost have to say, hey, this fine's coming if it's not resolved in X amount of time, and you really don't have a reasonable opportunity to say, okay, yes, we're gonna fine or not at that point. If you have a Leroy.
In our weed control in the city here, we give them 7 days to correct the problem. And every one of them pushes it right to the last minute and the neighbors are still upset that they have weeds in their yard.
Mhm.
Fiscal blowing around. So,
I think that's an example though of where we know the problem. Right?
Yeah.
We know that it's a noxious weed situation. It shouldn't take somebody, you should have a lawnmower and be able to resolve that
Exactly.
situation pretty quickly. So it's a known given amount of time, which makes that particular situation easy.
but if you give them a time of a week to correct the problem or whatever, they're gonna. If it's loud noise, they'll just continue to blare it away and say, yeah, I got another 6 days of
Mhm.
this. So,
But that does say that in that compliance letter, it's going to have a compliance deadline. So
Okay.
in order
Right.
to be a compliance letter, it has to be in there.
Right,
That's
there
right.
has to have a deadline, right? I mean, that's the key to everything, and I think. This allows, the way it's written, I understand what you're saying, right? It's subjective and we hate having things that are subjective,
Yeah,
right? It's
and I,
tough.
based on what the attorney said, I want to make sense. I
Yeah.
still think we should put some language in there that down in the exceptions to say bodily harm or something of that nature, because I think,
So,
public
all right,
safety.
but so
Public
think
safety.
about like. Parking violations, right? So Peter, help me out. This would be one that one of their sheriff's deputies could write, correct?
That's correct.
And this would dictate the fine that is collected as a parking ticket then. So if that's a situation where that is we're in a snow situation and there's a car parked on the street that's in the way and we ask the sheriff deputy to write a ticket and have the car removed. Um, not that we've ever done that, but
Well,
it's a situation
Yes, we have.
we have, and it's been
On
pretty rare.
repeated
Yeah,
incidents where they.
but it's the situation where then how do you go from writing a citation that moment? I mean, that would, unless that one remained as an exception. But something particular like that where that's something that's happening right now that needs to be resolved right away.
I think, I mean, the problem is we're centering around a word called reasonable. And it's a sliding definition. So if the officer is standing there, has informed the person who owns the car that they need to move it, and they refuse to, or they don't, then a reasonable amount of time has already passed, I think. At that point, so he should be able to write the ticket. I mean, what is a reasonable amount of time that you would expect the officer to stand there before he actually takes an action? You know, whereas there are other things that reasonable might mean a much different thing. Days, weeks, or whatever, but I think it asks for us to, to provide a time for it to be done. And then I think, the term reasonable at that point could be argued or, resolved. So I'm not sure we should change anything.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Peter.
two notes from the conversation. First, in further discussion of Councilmember Zanto's concern, I would note that whether there was a reasonable time given or not would be one of the defenses that person could raise with the council if it felt like the code enforcement officer was being way too draconian. And council thought this is not the way we want to be. We'd like to give people more time to solve these problems. Council would have that discretion to say, sorry, I don't think that was reasonable. That's one of the defenses. Second is a little bit more of a footnote. Yes, the sheriff assigned here could enforce your administrative citation ordinance, but I want to be clear, the sheriff has more than one source of authority. We're all charged with knowledge of the law, and they can ticket and cite however they want immediately upon watching a violation of state law, which will overlap with our code.
Okay. Thank you.
But if it is a parking ordinance, our parking ordinance, not state. Then this was.
Bill?
I'm okay with the language as is, and if we run into problems, then we readdress it at that time, but right now I trust Eric to make reasonable choices, and I trust our sheriff's department to make reasonable choices, and
We just want compliance. We're not looking for
Yeah.
their.
Right.
Yeah,
hearing
this
and
isn't,
all
No,
that, you know.
exactly.
This isn't gonna be a revenue generator.
Right.
you know,
Right. So I prefer more flexibility in our ordinances, so using the word may is my preference.
better than shall.
Yeah.
Okay,
We go with that.
any other comment? Anybody's ready, make a motion of any kind, we'd take that at this point too.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2025-02. Can we do them at the same time?
Yeah, let's just
And
do all three of
03.
those actions at the same motion,
So
please.
02, 03, are those the only two?
Oh, nope, 04 for the
And
summary
04?
publication, yeah.
So I make a motion to approve all three of the ordinances related to this subject.
Thank you, Councilmember
As is,
Marker.
written as is.
Thank you, Councilmember Marker. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Satterbach. So I've got a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2025-02, the administrative fines, and 2025-03, the fine schedule, along with resolution 2025-04, authorizing the summary of publication. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Moving on to item number 7.5, Administrator Johnson, you want to talk about city administrator recruitment?
Sure, hi, Mayor and Council, talking with Liza, she couldn't attend our meeting this evening. I know she's eagerly looking forward to your events next Tuesday. And one thing she asked that I could just share with you is and I think she emailed this to you, but this is the planned final schedule. And if you had any other desired feedback or changes, now's like probably the best time to do that. And then the second thing is I handed out, one of the things I recall you folks talked about at your last meeting was how can we post, ask a question for the city administrator that we could maybe get into that public forum conversation, meet and greet, or the public forum itself in a facilitated sense. And I handed that language out to you. We would post it on our website and wherever else people might think is appropriate. So I don't know if there are any other changes or thoughts, and then you can let her rip from there.
Eric, are we going to, given that one of the candidates in the list has now backed out, are we gonna bump all these times forward to clear that time?
I'm sorry, I'm looking, I know she had sent you a revised schedule. Yeah, I think.
If the schedule might be revised, then I'm just looking at the one in the packet here right now. The one that, okay, so the one in the packet is,
That went up today.
okay,
She sent you today, yeah. I was doing the same thing, yeah, the one she sent.
yeah, okay,
Only condenses it to the 3,
right,
and I think the big picture of it is the general times and the elements of it.
yeah.
Everybody will have to be a little bit flexible on how it all flows and it works together.
But I think we're gonna be probably set on the 5 o'clock time, though, if we're gonna notice that, are we noticing that as a separate meeting that night for
We
the,
would have. talking with the
reconvene?
City clerk, once you guys tell us that block is game plan, we will get those things posted both at the Legends with the address and the approximate times. And then when you convene back here, we'll say, let's just say it's a hard 5 o'clock.
yeah,
We'll post it as that.
okay,
I think the thought was, talking with Liza a little bit, and I've had a whole lot of conversation with her, certainly this is her doing a great job at this, but is to say, gives everybody a chance to take a deep breath, separate a little bit, come back to City Hall, and you can have a conversation here, and get feedback from staff and talk amongst yourselves in this setting.
Is 50 minutes enough time for deliberation though? I don't think it is.
I think it's just a time to start. You can go as long as you,
Okay, but what if we're posting we're posting a meeting, aren't we?
as long as we start, have the correct start.
at 5 o'clock,
Right, there's the public in at 4:10 with the deliberation? I thought they're only, they're not part of that, right?
It's
So
close.
the 5 o'clock meeting is an open meeting to say, here's who we picked. Correct? That's all we're doing at that meeting.
That's a closed session, isn't that?
No,
No.
you're meeting here where you deliberate and talk about those people.
With
right?
people in the audience.
People can be in the audience.
Oh, okay.
And you're just having that's my understanding.
So what's the 410 doing then? What are we doing at 410? Discussion and deliberation.
Let me look
Is
here
that
real
the-
fast.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just
Yeah,
looking-
hang on,
I
let me look and
apologize.
see what. So I want to make sure we look at the same schedule here. Yes, Bill, that would be the public meeting where we discuss and deliberate.
So what are
on
we
that.
talking about 5 o'clock then? if
I
it's
might have just,
4:10?
I was looking
Sorry.
at the old-
Oh,
The schedule in the packet says 5 o'clock because it adds that extra person in there. So now that we're looking at the same schedule, it makes sense.
I
sense now.
apologize.
Yeah.
It's the 4 o'clock. Reconvene back here
okay.
and then
So
You
4
guys-
o'clock is when the posting, the
Yep.
people will
Mhm.
come. Thank you.
So what changed? Cause last time that was closed.
Was it
Right.
closed or
Yeah.
did we just not have anybody there?
It was at Legends. I don't.
I
think
know it was at,
No,
it was at
published.
Legends,
We were back in the corner and no one could be around.
It was close.
because Carolyn was in the room almost all day.
She wasn't in the deliberation.
She wasn't in the deliberation.
well, that's a very good question. We can ask Liza what the current.
Well, I guess the other,
law is.
the piece that we'd ask is, Attorney McKell, is that a situation that warrants a closed meeting? Peter, is that something that should be an open meeting as per open meeting laws?
Mr. Mayor, under the general rules of the open meeting law, that would not be a closed meeting, but I don't know if I'm missing something somewhere in the weeds. I'll be happy to take a look at that and get back to Eric with a definitive answer to make sure that that is handled correctly.
Thank you.
But the point, one element that's consistent is to come back here. And maybe you have, maybe it's closed, maybe it's open, but at least you're here. You have a staff can give you its feedback about the interviews it had as well.
So let's say Peter comes back and say that part can be closed. Is that what we all prefer?
It's gotta be sharp. Isn't it?
I mean, there's some very personal comments being made at that point to
Yep.
deliberate who's going to be our CEO of the organization. I mean,
Mhm.
And should they?
in my opinion, that's
For,
Close.
you know, for
It's
private,
closed.
for private parties. You know, the people that, you know, applying should our comments be public?
Everything else.
I mean, otherwise, why aren't they in the interview?
Yeah,
Because that's also
Yeah.
the same thing.
I'd prefer it closed, I guess. And that, then
If legally possible.
if legally possible, and then we would need to meet, then we would have an open meeting right after the closed meeting
Make your
ends to make
findings.
the findings. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
What does Liza tell us?
I just emailed her. We'll see what she.
Between Peter and Liza and
We'll sort
you
it
guys sort it out. But I think you understand the desires of the council.
Okay.
Okay,
One other point or question, I was a little disheartened that we only got 3 candidates coming. And I know that there was a question about number 6 also joining. I know it may not be feasible, but I would suggest we reach out and see if that person is available to also join, to have 4 candidates. I understand that might be a long shot from logistics, but I'd rather make that request than have 3. My fear is you get 3 in a room and they're not the right one. Now we're back at square one and we're starting this thing all over again. You might have that still with 4, but having another one in there, especially since we're taking the full day, I'd much rather take another 45, 50 minutes with one more candidate than miss that opportunity. So I would propose us to reach out to that number 6 and see if that person's available.
you know, I would agree with you, Abe, if that person was local and
Is it possible?
didn't require a plane ticket to get here.
We don't know if he's here or not. Why don't we ask?
Is it possible to do a Zoom type of meeting?
Do it remote.
Yeah.
You guys comfortable doing it remote? interview?
I wouldn't want a remote.
Yeah, I would,
I'm just asking for, let's reach out and see if he's available. He or she might say, yes, I'm available. I can be in Credit River for that day. I'd hate to just
What-
assume that,
so if he asks if we're buying a plane ticket and a
yeah,
hotel,
we already said we were.
For that, we didn't say that one. We're not buying plane tickets for anyone, the other,
then we're buying a hotel for somebody
Yeah, a
paying
hotel.
And
mileage.
mileage.
And mileage.
and mileage. That's a
Right.
hell of a lot cheaper than a plane ticket.
You take mileage,
What's
take that
mileage?
mileage, that's
Yeah.
not gonna be that much difference.
I mean, we offer to pay mileage for others in a hotel for one. So, you know, this wouldn't be fair not to.
I think
If you're
I
gonna-
think
if you're
that
gonna add 'em,
person was a strong enough candidate to bring that person in. Personally.
I didn't feel that strong about that candidate though.
I didn't either. So I didn't have a problem.
I
Yeah.
didn't either. But. if you're
All right,
gonna
I'm on the
do it-
losing side tonight anyway. It's all right.
but if you're gonna do
No,
I
it's
think if
good
he was
discussion,
close-
Gabe. I'm glad you bring it up because it's good to talk about it, right? That's not a problem.
If they were local, I'd probably, I
But if
wouldn't
you're gonna
hear
do
as
it,
much.
and we're gonna pay mileage for somebody else, the mileage is probably the same as plane ticket.
Oh my gosh, I don't think so. From where
Not,
that person
not from where
could
that
be
person
flying,
lives.
I think it's a
That's not
multi,
that's not
it's a puddle jumper to a kind of a
No.
regional airport, to a major
No.
airport, to a, well, I don't know. I
Okay.
prefer the other 22 applications that we got. Sure would be nice to look at those and if those are local, I mean, but that's a whole nother
Could we have
story.
Liza reach out to that person and see if they're gonna be in the area?
Or are there other of the other applications that we had? Is there one that's worth a second look?
I mean, we're up against the clock at this point,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, so that was my only reason is I thought that candidate was strong enough to come in for that.
Oof.
You searching, I'm too.
Yeah, it's $1,000 airplane ticket.
We don't know if he's
It is.
Dude,
candidate number 6 is even
1077.
having to do that though.
1,077, plus you're gonna have 2 nights probably.
Candidate number 6 has family in Minnesota. Possibly the candidate's here. All I'm asking for, why wouldn't we ask if the candidate's gonna be here? And then if we don't wanna pay the airfare, then fine, let's not pay the airfare.
Okay, so I would be okay with asking if he happens to be in town visiting the relatives that he has in town. I would not be in favor of paying for airfare to get here.
Okay,
I can get on board with that.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
That sound good, Ian?
we'll ask the question.
Okay.
There you want.
I mean, we're gonna be paying $200 for another
Mileage on the
candidate to
other
drive here
Mm-hmm,
and a hotel.
mm-hmm.
So.
All right, any other questions on that topic? All right. Let's move on to item 7.6. Discuss government center, citizens advisory committee concept of site evaluations. I think this one, Abe, do you have this one?
Yeah. Yeah, so during the last government center citizens advisory committee, the topic of land came up. And as the chair was looking through the bylaws, that wasn't specifically on the bylaws as one of the scope items. And the question was, do we want to include that into the scope as to if we are going to recommend a building or a increase in the building or anything of that nature, should we also be giving some recommendations on land? The thought was when we brought this to the public, originally land was a very hot topic. I think of the lots of emails I got, that was more, I would say over half of them was where versus the what. So I personally think we should add that to the scope to be able to say, can you even find any land that's available? What type of land would we be recommending? Where would we be recommending?
How much land?
Yeah,
It's like a search, it's like a search area type of thing, like
yeah, search
potentially
area.
draw a circle on the map of a search area.
Yeah, and I would
Whereas,
think,
whereas then at that point, then if we decide that, you know, engage with a realtor to maybe try to engage some residents and, or some landowners or something like that. Would be the next logical step in that process. But having at least a search area to work within might be reasonable.
I think that in criteria. I mean, what type of road should it be located on? I mean, you know, there's a lot of, they could, the committee could actually help to evaluate our needs with the building, needs. And then create basically a list of the qualifications of a piece of property, which would allow at that point, you know, the person doing the search or whatever.
Yeah, I think
The chance to.
the only
chance to get the
problem-
right Piece of property.
the more you dial it in, if you think about it this way, the more you dial in the criteria, it's gonna limit the parcels.
Well, the other
And
side.
then,
of it
then
is-
you get to, but if you start limiting the parcels, then those who have those parcels that it gets limited to, that might
Sure,
change the price.
sure, but the other side of that would be that, you know, that could also expand for them to analyze a proposed piece of property to make sure that it would work with that. Also, I mean, the committee could be authorized to look at it both ways.
Exercise eminent domain.
No,
Why was it not? in the scope?
Excuse me, sir, this, we're not in a public
I know, why was it not? in
forum
the
right
scope
now.
of the-
Sir, we're, please.
So tonight, Mr. Mayor, aren't we looking at the memo that was drafted by by the advisory committee and they proposed language that they wanted to add to the bylaws? Is that what we're approving tonight?
Yes.
So-
That's what the recommendation
So
is,
should we
Bill.
read that and we're okay with it? It says research and discuss options and alternatives to the current government center project, e.g. phases of the project, remodeling or rebuilding the government center on the current site, or whether the city should consider purchasing land for a new government center and or public works building. I guess the only language change is adding whether the city should consider purchasing land. So they're really just, they're making a recommendation whether we should do it or not actually going out and looking for it. Correct?
Right,
correct.
right.
Okay.
I personally would even take it a step further. We have limited resources. We have a highly engaged group of citizens that are spending a lot of time on this. And if they are willing to take it a step further, I would recommend that we allow them to personally.
Allow them to what though?
To this
To
language,
identify specific area, property types, things of that.
None of them are land brokers or land
We're not asking them
experts.
to be land brokers.
But don't they have to be, or they have to hire someone to do that?
But they're not gonna be negotiating, they're just going to be, here's property that we've found that could be applicable for this. They don't have to even have the conversations or anything,
Yeah.
but here's a plot that actually looks like that might work real well. Whether that is or not, I don't know, but
Right, that's up for somebody farther up the ladder to make that decision, but at least I agree with you. I think that we should really empower them to do that. They're here to advise. And that's it. I mean, they're not making decisions, they're here to advise, so. The more you get to look at it, the better our information is.
So are we authorizing them to talk to property owners to see if it's even viable?
No,
nah, we don't want to do that.
Why would we
That's-
want them to waste their time looking at something where it's not viable to do? I'd prefer to hire a land broker if we're serious about buying land and not having non-experts looking for land.
I think for a couple.
They can tell us
reasons.
what we need in terms of land based on
Yeah.
what they're proposing,
Eh,
but it stops there.
Yeah, Bill, I agree with you, and to a point of sometimes when when you're looking at buying that land, depending on who the purchaser is, may change whether the person wants to sell or not, or, you know, what kind of deal they're willing to make. So it's the only reason I want to be a little careful on identifying parcels directly, before we have somebody that can reach out and make contact with the property owners and try to gauge the willingness of selling before all that becomes identified. That's my concern on that piece of it, is going that far, is having this, you know, maybe if if they want to have a list of suggestions that we don't make a big deal about, I'm okay with
I think
that.
along that
but-
lines, yes.
Cause we,
But I think we can do that with the same language. I don't think we need to change the language. Yeah, I think if we allow them to just evaluate that piece and along the side, you know, kind of have a list of potentials that we could, if we decide to move forward with something, that we would hand off to a real estate broker or somebody that make contact. Leroy, sorry, you were,
well, I was just gonna say, a few years ago, we approached an individual on that and all of a sudden it tripled price of the land, which is crazy.
But that's gonna happen regardless when we start
Well-
negotiation.
It may, yeah.
I agree. I don't think it's prudent to have them go out and have conversations, but if they're willing to look at a map and say, this is a plot that can potentially work, this is a plot that can potentially work,
I agree.
what harm?
yeah, and Abe, I think we can allow them to do that under this language that you have proposed here.
Read how it would fit in.
'Cause that one just says whether the city should consider purchasing. The only reason I do
but-
this is the chair is a lawyer and will read this very
Right.
verbatim, and that doesn't say that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and if we wanna keep it that way, because that's what they asked, that's fine. I think they're just looking for guidance.
Right.
So, this isn't one I'm not gonna, this isn't
No,
one I'm
no.
fighting on.
Yeah, my recommendation is let's let them go with this for a while and see where, if they needed further adjustments later on the path, we'll adjust it later. Let's just give them this,
Okay.
this piece to start doing something
And this is what they asked.
Mhm.
and I do agree that all options should be open, including the gentleman that made that comment. It's another option. I'm not saying we should do it, but that's an option. Another option is asking for donations of land, or putting, you know, yeah, there's other options too. Try and get the price down. So,
Put your name on the building and everything.
the city council chambers can be,
Yeah. That'll look like a racetrack.
it's an option.
Hey,
It is an
Got
option.
billboards around.
all right,
Well,
all right, so, yeah, we can talk about that later, you guys. Let's deal with this action that's in front of us. So I'm ready to take a motion if somebody is ready to make a motion to approve that language.
All right, I'll second.
Okay, I've got Zonto for the motion and Seiderbach for the second. Motion and a second to modify the language of the Government Center Citizens Advisory Committee bylaws, section 2.3, to include the language of whether the city should consider purchasing land for new government center and or a public works building. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 7.7, consider proposals related to a study, talking about UER, amending UER 1/40. Administrator Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I apologize for the length it took to get this information. I know staff was very busy in that time of year to kind of think about what you were asking for and hopefully more likely accommodates what you're seeking. What those costs for those three studies would be. Those are enumerated in your packet, roughly $9,000 from an engineering perspective. Talking about a conceptual sanitary sewer, 20-year sewer plan, CIP. The city planner, obviously Claire is here. I won't begin to speak for her, but their proposal is in the packet, including the three phases. And then lastly, maybe the more complicated element, but a little more gray element was how does Ellers begin to think about it, but that really kind of stems from what are the assumptions going in, so. I think we have to be a little more fluid on that number if you're gonna move forward. So in total, you have $21,500. Shane is on vacation this week and Claire is here to ask her questions, of course. So that's where we stand.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Council members, questions and discussion.
I think one of the things though is like, are we limiting the thing by saying over the next 10 or 20 years? Are we really looking at what are the costs or what are the future impacts even farther out? Which I think is important. And are we getting enough of the information that we're looking for? Or do we need to focus a little bit more and get further information?
What things, Jay, would you be considering that we're missing?
Basically the financial pros and cons. The future, how you can change development completely. And fail to be able to recoup the costs of the infrastructure that you put in. I'm concerned about us going from a slow, fluid building out of infrastructure to all of a sudden being impacted by having to provide filling in the gaps and everything else to do that, or not getting things covered, not getting things paid for. And then having essentially the rest of the city paying for it. Or not being able to pay for it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm against doing, I'm sorry, Leora, go ahead.
I'm for doing this and, we need the sewer study to see what would be practical to be sewered, what isn't.
I think that's already ongoing.
It started, yes,
Mhm.
but to go ahead with it and for the other phases also.
Okay,
Well, here's Bill.
Bill,
I'm against it. I don't want to spend this money for it. I was in favor of having MSA do that mini study. I think it was for $4,800. I don't think this is a big issue. I think we're trying to, in my opinion, the reason why I requested this back in September was to get our ordinance consistent with our comp plan, and our comp plan says that area is diversified rural. And our zoning map is urban expansion reserve. So I don't think there's a lot of risk in doing this, and anything we can do to slow down development, I'm for, and I think this would be one of them, that we could slow down development. And I think that anything that Ehlers does, they're a good firm, but whatever assumptions we give them, they can make the numbers wherever they want to make. It's all looking into a crystal ball, and we don't know where development's going to go. We don't know if there's going to be a housing, crisis that changes everything. So I don't think there's much value in doing a long-term 10 or 20-year look. Like we don't even know what property owners would do anything. So I don't know how that would even work. So I'm against spending any money. If we're not going to do the mini study that MSA was going to do, I'm not for doing all this other stuff. There's also two other things that weren't even on here, and there's supposed to be a survey that we're supposed to do, and then there's also the MPCA that they were supposed to get involved too, and I can't remember what they were supposed to do, but that's not even addressed here. So I wouldn't want to agree with any of these three things.
We talked about those. We did reach out to the county to determine, well, there's two pieces of that, to find certain pieces of property that are X acreage.
Yep.
And then communicate with them. So we have that list.
Is that all they were gonna do? So that's done? I saw the list.
Created the list. We're prepared to send that out, but send that out if the rest of it's not proceeding.
Okay,
That, and then the second piece was,
because that would cost money too, I assume, $1,000. Okay,
I mean,
500.
and then the second piece would be reaching out to MPCA and Scott County about sanitary sewer options. Seeing what they might think about. How would the sanitary extensions or expansions affect those lines? That was my takeaway from
Yeah.
it. So till the council says, hey, we're gonna go forward the rest of this, are we gonna do these two pieces?
Well, we've got a couple of years and then we're gonna be looking at 2050 comp plan. So, I mean, if we're looking at all of those things, this is probably just as relevant then. This can help us probably do some more planning. Make better decisions. I think that the original thing that was asked for really just didn't hit what needed to be known, the information that we needed. I think that this is getting better at it, but we still need more information because I think making changes to this, long term, 10 to 20 years isn't actually long term enough. In my mind, I think we need to be looking at even farther down the road. So, maybe we should work on refining this, what we're asking for. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think we should just table it either at this point. I think we've gone farther into it.
One of the things that I've been thinking about as this is coming up here today is I agree with what you're saying, Jay, that there's some information here that's likely to be helpful in the next planning cycle. But then I look at what our staff has on their plate today. Shane's already working on the sewer study. We've got park planning going on with the planner. We've got cannabis ordinance going on with the planner right now.
Do we think we want to just table it for?
That's I'm tempted to say that we put this on the back burner for now and give us some time to think about what other elements that you might want in this, and then let's knock off, because it certainly the piece that Shane's working on already would be very helpful to the discussion, because then you're going to have a better layout of what that comprehensive sewer study looks like, and a bit more information there.
Right, so, I think we want to maybe table it, but we have a time when we would bring it back on. Table it for what period of time? It's like September, August?
Mr. Mayor, something that might want to keep in perspective is that draft Imagine 2050 plan is going to be not implemented soon. I mean, the public hearing part, I think they're still working through some drafts, the last I heard. If any of that land use designation changes for the next planning cycle, we may want to incorporate that into this land use study. So I would say that might be a good time, because if the density does adjust.
What's the schedule for that?
I have a meeting with some Met Council reps next week, so I can let you know. I don't know right now, but I know there was an article in the Star Tribune about density with the Met Council, and that's what triggered this meeting with one of my other communities. So
I think staff
can
and
let
Met
you
Council
know.
would like to get it approved sooner than later, but the council itself is having struggles with it.
yeah, with their staff.
So who knows how long that time is gonna be.
Mhm.
Right,
But that just might be about, because it would, it would be really unfortunate if we did do all of this work and that density changed. And I'm not to say that you need to wait until your full comp planning process, because that will likely start, I would assume, in 2027. But they should, I think that what we were thinking, maybe this summer, bringing it back up, it might be a possible time for when those designations and densities are more solidified with the Met Council, to then benefit the 2050 planning process for the city. You'll have a base. I know there's some other things that you all want to work on with the land use map for this next cycle,
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, this is something I don't know that we want to push it off forever either, because I think it's important to have this at least in our knowledge
Mhm.
bank. Because we may have, we may be implored to change, do comp plan amendments. We may have another development pop up again. That we would want to be able to refer back to this. So I think rather than sitting there and reacting to something, I think we would be better off to have this. So I don't think we should just push it off forever, but I do agree that we should. In light of the Met Council's possible changes to that, we should make sure that's incorporated in what we pay for to get our study.
Mhm.
right.
So, I think we should probably, we don't have to act on this right now.
Don't have to.
Just bring it back. Let's wait till we find out what that information is. And then do something with this. Meantime, we can all look at it a little closer, and figure out if there's something we're missing.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
But I do, like I was saying before, I think that limiting what we're looking at to a certain period of time is not actually the intent of what we were asking for. I think we're asking for, we're looking at the whole build out future.
Okay, any other comments?
Just point of clarification, did you say you had the list of those properties that,
Listed in the area,
okay,
kind of shows them where they are.
okay,
Came out about a month ago.
okay.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't remember that. Okay.
yeah, I think it was emailed out to the council.
Yeah.
No, I've got it.
All right, I'll.
The county GIS was very kind and ran some reports for us.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no other future comments or actions on that one for right now, we'll move on to staff and council member updates. I'll start down on the right side of the table. Claire, you got anything for us?
No,
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Two things, coming soon and your springtime is your
Board of Equalization.
Equalization, and if I recover the list, I think Councilmember Margaret is the only approved trained.
No,
Did you do?
Jay is
that?
too.
Awesome. Okay, so as long as one of you is, and we'll start hearing the dates from the county.
Right.
If you did ever want to go to an open book format, whether that's good or bad, you do have to let the county know pretty much a year in advance. So if you thought maybe next year you wanted to be more on the open book side where you don't have to have your own meeting, then gotta give them, I think, notice by December 1. So just put that in your memory bank. And then the last thing, you have a meeting, well, you have the city administrator hiring matter next Tuesday. And in theory, you'll be here in this room at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever ultimately the time is.
4:15.
4:15. You also have a planned council meeting for February 3rd. So I don't know if we have it off the top of my head, if we have any huge item for that agenda. We very well could and might need that meeting from a timing perspective of that. But in the event we can condense these things, would anybody have an objection to that, at least conceptually? So maybe I'll spare you a separate Tuesday night.
I'm all for less meetings.
So which one are you?
So you have your 28th meeting, but you have a meeting the following Monday. So maybe if, I don't know what we have on that agenda, at least we sit here today, we could have 5 things that are really important that we need to have on the 3rd, but if in the event staff can assemble things and things seem appropriate, maybe cancel that meeting and we can move things to the 28th. We'll do our best, but that's a shot. If there are any.
I think I'd rather have just the council meeting and the hiring. It's two separate.
Two separate
events.
items.
Yeah,
I get that too. So I wanted to throw it out.
you're spending a day on the one and then you're gonna start a council meeting afterwards, you know, where there might be. we may wanna-
And
we
we're-
may wanna have some time
Well,
to.
and we're a week away, right?
Right,
That's next week, so,
right.
You will.
because then, my concern then is then items that would be coming up throughout that next week would miss for the, right? So think about it, right? So if we're talking next week, next Tuesday, so a week from today,
Right.
right? So yes, there may be,
Things that hopefully would just not be so time sensitive that we, that.
Right.
that somehow would not be, could cause you to not have a meeting on the third, it's just a thought. And if that's not real, that's not something you want to do in the big picture, that's fine too.
but so we'd have to take some action to revise our council calendar,
Well, how you can cancel a meeting, just,
right?
let's skip it.
No, good thought, Eric. I'm glad we had the discussion. And I'm, because I'm like Bill, if I can free up a weeknight, I'd free up a weeknight. I'm just thinking of the practicalities of it, that it might make it difficult, given it's only a week
Yeah.
difference.
And maybe Claire's got something here that she might be upset that I'm even bringing this up, or the city attorney, or Shane, somebody, but, it's just a thought.
Okay,
Nope.
nothing, Abe? Leroy?
Gravel roads. Been a hot topic in the last 2 weeks. Got people complaining about the dust, so I don't know. You guys want, should we put water on them, let them freeze over, or what should we do?
Tell the garbage trucks to slow down. Call them up, and because Buckingham, they go like a bat out of hell.
Everywhere.
The garbage
They can,
flies all over the place.
Everybody should slow down, then their cars wouldn't get dirty, that's the biggest complaint.
It is dusty. I drove across one a couple weeks ago, and those gravel roads are pretty dusty right now.
It'll get better
But
if it snows, right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
then they'll get icy.
As long as it stays cold between now and the snow, that's the key.
But, yeah. That's all I have.
Okay. I've got nothing tonight. Jay, anything?
Yeah, Scale, they had a kind of an update on the cannabis,
Mhm.
pretty good panel. Lot of things to think about. I don't think we're any closer to what we need for, for how to actually legislate it or anything else, but, the state is still behind.
Mhm.
And, one of the things that I picked up was kind of interesting. We had a good conversation here about, agricultural cultivation, processing, and, it's a lot more than just having a retail spot.
Mhm.
But also, one of the things that was brought up is also events. And, we probably should think about
Mhm.
putting some language into an ordinance or whatever of our own to legislate events.
What happens if somebody comes with a request?
Right. Somebody
Mhm.
wants to have a party, somebody wants to have something, some outdoor activity or whatever. We're not currently, we haven't even looked at it, so. There is I think everybody could probably go look at the ordinance itself, which is, chapter 342 of the Minnesota Code.
State statute.
Yeah,
The proposed rules.
Yeah, it's a state statute with the proposed rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so 342, if everybody remembers that, if you want to do a little of your own research. It'd be a good idea.
Yeah, and so we already, players are already working that with the planning commission, so, and. Right, you'll have that to the planning commission.
Yes, I'm meeting with city attorney staff on Friday, so if there's any comments, Jay, from your scale meeting that you want to send our way for discussion, I took some notes from what you were discussing, but yeah, we'll be meeting internally, and then it will be going for public hearing in February to the planning commission.
Perfect. Thank you, Jay. Bill.
I attended the same meeting. I'm gonna send you some
Yeah,
comments,
please.
okay? Peter, and then I'm waiting on a question I had that I sent to you related to the zoning for cultivation. Because the cities they had a list of all the cities and what they can do, and we don't have agricultural zoning. So therefore, can any culture, The other cities where you could do cultivation and commercial, industrial, or agricultural. If we don't have hardly any commercial, industrial, or agricultural, then we don't have to have any cultivation. That's the way I understood it. Now, and I didn't know if I was right to understand it.
Yeah, and I'll let Peter and Claire, they're the ones, kind of my thought on that, Bill, is that, somebody can always apply for a comprehensive plan amendment to change a piece to commercial if they wish. And if that's where we, again, let me back up a second. I feel like, in Minnesota, that's not gonna be something that's be grown outside.
Right,
It's
it
gonna
could be inside.
It's
So
gonna be a commercial type
commercial,
of building, so it
industrial.
likely fits in commercial industrial better than it
Right.
does agricultural land.
Right,
In which case, if that's what we decide we want in our ordinance of allowed uses in that district, because we'll have to allow it in some district
yeah.
somewhere, right? And we don't,
I was kind of
The
happy
way
though,
the-
if it's
the way-
commercial industrial, which we don't have.
that's a
hardly.
better spot for it, because then it's easier for us to,
Right.
discuss.
Right. It's not in someone's backyard.
Right, exactly. And to that point, not having any isn't gonna get us out of it, right? The state statutes are so broad that
I know.
they're pretty much telling us you've gotta allow it somewhere. So you're better off setting that up and saying where it's allowed before it just happens. And then if it just happens, it could happen anywhere. And then, if somebody makes a request and you don't like that spot, it's hard to change the rules at that point, right?
Well, actually, a commercial grow facility with some processing can be
Yeah.
as small as 2 cargo containers. 'Cause
Yeah.
they're actually made self-contained now, where you can buy it and bring it in.
Yeah, and there's differences, right? Because legally,
Think of
a
2
person,
cargo containers.
legally, a
side by
person can
side.
grow it themselves at their house, right? You can have X number of plants.
Currently, you can
and
have, I think state statute allows you 8,
Yeah, and
plants.
I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's at
and-
some point and,
and there's a lot of security that goes with that and screening and
Right.
everything else, but, I mean, you could have that, you
Mhm.
could have something just slightly
Yeah.
beyond that.
but yeah, good question, good
Yeah,
point.
it's
Bill.
it was a good informative. That was the first one I went to. So maybe if they download the presentation.
Yeah, the
So we
presentation,
can give a copy to Claire. There's a couple slides related to this.
I don't think that they don't do the video, but they do
They
the,
don't do the video, okay.
no,
But I'll send that to you. And then we have the
You can get
vision.
the PowerPoint.
I've got the PowerPoint.
Right.
Oh, you have the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I had Tracy send it to me
Oh.
afterwards. Yeah,
Could you send it to
Mhm.
everyone, maybe? That'd be good. Vision meetings tomorrow night. We have the survey results. So we're just looking at them as of this afternoon. And they're not surprising. So we'll get into that tomorrow. That's all I have.
okay, sounds good. Lucas, I can't imagine that after 4 days that you have anything to report tonight.
Nothing to report this time.
Okay, Clerk Jones, anything to report? Sounds good. Abe?
Oh, time for adjourn. I'd like to make that motion.
Motion to adjourn. Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Second by Schomer. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening and stay warm.